You've heard of Viking raids, Viking ships, Viking battles, Viking beards, but tonight we're raiding something a little softer. Viking sleep. Yes, the axe-wielding, ale-chugging, beard-pleating Norsemen had to lie down and close their eyes eventually. And spoiler alert, it wasn't all war cries and Valhalla dreams. Sleep in the Viking Age was its own strange, ritualistic and downright uncomfortable saga, but also surprisingly intimate, culturally rich, and sometimes a little weird. So dim the lights, wrap yourself in something warm, and get ready to tuck into the lesser-known side of Norse life, the one where they weren't storming monasteries or howling into the wind, but gently snoring into seal fur blankets while hoping not to get stabbed by a cousin. Let's begin. First off, Viking sleep wasn't private. Modern folks get bedrooms, blackout curtains, white noise apps, maybe even a lavender pillow spray. Vikings? They got a smoke-filled longhouse with 20 other people, and possibly a few goats snoring under the bench. These longhouses were the central hub. Sleeping quarters, dining hall, armoury, nursery, romantic hideaway and livestock shelter all rolled into one. Most of the family and sometimes even visiting warriors or neighbours slept on raised wooden platforms lining the walls, often covered in animal skins, straw or wool blankets. The further you were from the fire pit in the centre, the colder and rougher the night. And before you romanticise that cosy communal sleep, remember this: no insulation, no privacy, and very little personal space. If someone had a bad case of mead burps or foot rot, everyone knew it. If a couple was being a little too affectionate, well, that was just part of the ambience. But communal sleep had its purpose. In a brutal Nordic climate, body heat was a valuable resource. You didn't huddle for fun, you huddled to not freeze to death. And this closeness also strengthened bonds. Families quite literally stuck together, night after night, through snowstorms and sagas alike. And yet, Vikings took sleep seriously. This was not a lazy culture, but they respected rest like a finely honed blade. Not flashy, but essential. In Norse mythology, sleep was tied to deep, powerful forces. Dreams weren't just idle images, they were messages, omens, warnings, sometimes even direct visits from the gods or the dead. A weird dream about your uncle covered in fish. That might mean you're about to inherit a boat, or that he's about to die in one. There are sagas where warriors wake from dreams drenched in sweat, predicting battle outcomes or betrayals. Dream interpreters, sometimes velvers, seers, were respected figures. Sleep wasn't wasted time, it was spiritual communication with the other world. That also meant sleep had rituals. Some Vikings burned herbs before bed, not recreationally, mind you, but to banish bad spirits or encourage clearer dreams. They wore amulets in bed. Some even slept with weapons nearby. Not for comfort, but because you never knew who might sneak in while you were dreaming of Thor's goats. And how long did Vikings sleep? Well, they didn't have clocks, but their routines followed the natural light. In summer, when the Nordic sun barely set, they might nap in short bursts or rise early to make the most of daylight. But in winter, long, dark months called for long, dark sleep. Some evidence suggests Vikings leaned into seasonal rhythms, practicing what we might now call biphasic sleep, with a first sleep and second sleep separated by a period of wakefulness. During that nighttime pause, sometimes called the watch, people might whisper, share stories, sneak a snack, or, yes, sneak into someone else's bed. Romantic trysts didn't need much cover when half the household was already pretending not to hear anything. And let's not forget the Viking snores. Oh yes, these were people who drank thick ale, ate cured meat, fought in chainmail, and possibly had 7 teeth left by age 40. So you can imagine the nighttime soundtrack. Deep. But for all their roughness, Viking sleeping habits weren't barbaric. They were communal, symbolic, and rhythmic, bound by ritual and survival. Sleep wasn't weakness, it was strategy. A rested warrior was a sharper warrior. A well-dreamed elder could guide a village. And in a land where winters were long and battles unpredictable, sleep was a rare and sacred peace. So while modern folks toss and turn over emails and taxes, the Vikings, they curled up in smoky longhouses wrapped in furs, dreams thick with omens, hearts warmed by firelight and mead. And that brings us to our first tale in this cosy Norse slumber saga. A look into who Vikings slept with and why it wasn't always who you'd expect. Because when your bed's made of straw, your options are limited, and your in-laws are sleeping 6 feet away. Things get complicated fast. Stay close. It's about to get a little steamy and very awkward. The night was supposed to be quiet, the longhouse dark and filled with the heavy breathing of Vikings drifting into sleep. But for many, especially the powerful, midnight was never just about rest. It was a time when alliances were tested, rivalries smouldered, and the most dangerous politics unfolded between sheets. You see, in Viking society, the bed was far more than a place for rest. It was a stage for strategy, a battlefield for influence, and sometimes a trap with teeth. Because who you shared your bed with could mean the difference between power and exile, between life and an early death. Let's unpack this tangled web of Viking bedmates and midnight politics, a world where sleep was anything but peaceful. Sleeping together wasn't always about warmth. Unlike our modern cosy bedrooms, Viking sleeping arrangements were communal and layered with meaning. Longhouses housed entire families, warriors, thralls, slaves, and guests all under one roof. Beds were often wooden platforms or straw-stuffed pallets lined with animal furs. Privacy was a luxury, not a right. Within the ruling class, where political marriages sealed alliances and rivalries simmered, who shared a bed could symbolize trust, favour, or threat. Married couples often had to share cramped beds, but royal marriages weren't love stories. They were alliances forged to consolidate land, power, and influence. Many kings and jarls viewed their wives as pawns in the greater game, with nights spent negotiating silently through shared blankets. An unfaithful queen wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was political poison. Mistresses, concubines, and favoured warriors might share a king's bed, but that too carried risk. Favour could flip overnight, and jealousy led to poison, threats, or worse. Sleeping next to the king could mean power or a dagger in your back. Bed sharing wasn't just a matter of convenience, it was a deliberate political tool. Vikings believed proximity could build alliances or breed suspicion. Imagine the subtle messages sent in the flickering firelight. Who sat near the hearth, who shared the closest bed, whose breath mingled under furs. If a rival was invited to bed, it might be a peace offering or a trap. Close quarters meant eavesdropping, whispered plots, and the silent weighing of loyalty. An ally in bed could become a traitor come dawn. Nights in Viking halls were often punctuated by whispered conversations, careful confessions, and plotting under the cover of darkness. Kings and chieftains sometimes held secret councils by the dying embers, using sleep as a weapon. Words spoken in bed could seal treaties or sentence rivals to exile, or death. Because even in sleep, Viking power struggles never rested. If daylight brought battles on fields, nighttime battles happened between sheets. There are sagas of kings and jarls betrayed in their beds, knives slipping beneath pillows, conspirators whispering curses and promises. Trust was fragile. Even the closest bedmate could be a poisoner or assassin. The story of King Harold Fairhair includes a chilling chapter, where an assassin tried to kill him while he slept, only to be caught by a loyal guard whose eyes never closed. It was a constant gamble. Sleeping could mean vulnerability or survival. Sometimes political prisoners were forced to sleep alongside their captors, sharing beds in a cruel twist of power. These moments were filled with tension, watchful eyes, clenched fists beneath blankets, and the knowledge that one wrong move could mean death. Romantic relationships, affairs, and marriages overlapped with politics in Viking culture. The bed was where passion mixed with power. Kings often kept multiple wives or concubines. These women, sometimes from rival clans, were both cherished and weaponized. A favoured bedmate could gain influence at court, shift alliances, or sow discord. For the women, survival often meant walking a tightrope, balancing affection, manipulation, and danger in the dark. Given all this, it's no surprise Viking kings and nobles took precautions at night. They slept surrounded by trusted guards. Some had multiple beds in a room to confuse assassins. Others used charms, runes, and rituals to ward off evil spirits and treachery. The night watch wasn't just about guarding the walls. It was about watching the bed. In many Viking households, sleep wasn't a private sanctuary but a communal experience. Men, women, children, and slaves often slept in the same room, layered on benches, piles of straw, or raised platforms. Noise, snoring, and midnight movement were accepted. Privacy was sacrificed for warmth and survival. Imagine trying to sneak an affair or plan a betrayal in such crowded conditions. It was a delicate dance of shadows and whispers. Your bed and sleeping arrangements broadcast your status. Kings and jarls had large raised beds lined with furs and adorned with carved posts, symbols of power even in rest. Thralls and common folk slept on simple pallets with little insulation. Invitations to share a noble's bed were gestures of favour or subtle domination. For Viking warriors, sleep was a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. They were expected to rest well enough to fight the next day, but stay alert for raids or attacks. Sleep was light, interrupted, and often accompanied by nightmares of battle and death. This hyper-awareness could blur the line between waking and dreaming, a liminal space where myths, fears, and memories mingled. So next time you lie down in your cosy bed, remember the Vikings, for whom sleep was never just a peaceful retreat, but a complex stage for politics, passion, survival, and sometimes pure terror. Their nights were alive with whispers, plots, and the breath of enemies and lovers alike. That's the tangled story of Viking bedmates and midnight politics, where sleep was a power game, alliances were forged or broken beneath blankets, and trust was the most dangerous thing of all. Next up, we'll explore how the Vikings' dreams themselves were shaped by their world, from prophetic visions to nightmares of Ragnarok. For the Vikings, sleep was never just sleep. It was a gateway, a bridge between the mortal world and the vast mysterious realm of the gods and spirits. Dreams in particular held immense power. They were messages from the divine, warnings from the ancestors, or sometimes just the mind's way of sorting through a day full of battle, feast, and politics. When a Viking closed their eyes, they didn't just expect rest. They expected a journey. Dreams were often taken seriously, sometimes frighteningly so. A bad dream wasn't just a bad night's sleep. It was a sign that the gods were displeased, or that danger loomed on the horizon. Warriors dreamed of bloody battles yet to come. Farmers saw omens of famine in twisted visions, and kings sometimes received direct messages about betrayals in the form of animals or strange symbols. The Vikings believed that the dream realm was a place where the soul could travel freely. Some even practiced what modern scholars call dream incubation, sleeping in sacred places or near holy stones to invite prophetic visions. Seers and shamans would interpret these dreams, deciphering the hidden meaning and advising leaders on what steps to take next. But not all dreams were divine. Some were nightmares, dark, terrifying visitations from the dreaded mare or nightmare, a supernatural being thought to sit on the chest of sleepers, causing suffocation and terror. These nightmares were feared because they could sap strength, cause illness or even steal a person's soul. Vikings had rituals and charms designed to ward off such spirits, including placing iron weapons under pillows or carving protective runes on doorways. Sleepwalking was another mysterious phenomenon. Some believed that those who walked in their sleep had their spirits wandering the worlds beyond, caught between waking and dreaming. This liminal state was dangerous. A sleepwalker might be vulnerable to spirit possession or magical attacks. Dreams were also a communal experience. After waking, Vikings often shared their visions with family or clan members, discussing what the signs might mean. These conversations could change the course of decisions, from going to war to arranging marriages or sacrifices. There are recorded sagas filled with vivid dream sequences that changed history. One famous tale tells of a warrior dreaming of Odin himself, who warned him of an impending ambush. Acting on this vision, the warrior avoided death and won a crucial battle, securing his place in history and legend. But dreams weren't always literal. They were filled with symbols: ravens, wolves, serpents, and other animals each carried meaning. A raven might represent Odin's watchful eye, a wolf danger or ferocity, a serpent hidden knowledge or betrayal. Learning to read these signs was a skill passed down through generations. For Viking women, dreams could be even more potent. They often sought out prophetic dreams about childbirth, marriage, or the fate of their children. Some believed that unborn babies were especially susceptible to dreams sent from the gods, prophecies that could determine the child's future. Sleep itself was thought to be sacred, a time when the soul was vulnerable but also capable of great power. This duality meant Vikings approached sleep with respect and caution, surrounding themselves with protective charms and rituals. They would whisper prayers to gods like Frigg and Odin before bed, asking for safe passage through the night and clarity in their dreams. In many ways, the Viking relationship with dreams was like holding a double-edged sword. Dreams could inspire courage or warn of doom. They could heal or terrify. They reminded the Vikings that sleep was a fragile thread connecting them not just to rest, but to fate itself. So, as your eyes grow heavy tonight, imagine the Vikings lying down beside you, their minds swirling with visions of gods, monsters, battles, and futures yet unwritten. Their dreams might have been wild, cryptic, or terrifying, but they were never empty. For the Vikings, the night was a wild frontier, a place where the boundary between the known and unknown blurred. Sleep wasn't just about closing your eyes and drifting off. It was a ritual steeped in both reverence and fear. Because when the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness swallowed the land, the spirits woke, and the dangers of the night crept closer. To protect themselves and their families, Vikings developed a rich tapestry of sleep rituals, practices designed to keep evil at bay, to invite good dreams, and to ensure that when their heads finally hit the pillow, they would not be alone. Let's take a journey into these nighttime customs and see how a Viking might prepare for the descent into sleep, surrounded by mystery, magic, and maybe a little madness. First, there was the importance of the physical space itself. Longhouses were more than just homes. They were protective fortresses of wood and stone, carefully built to shield inhabitants from both natural and supernatural dangers. The hearth, the fiery heart of the house, was never allowed to die out. Its flames were believed to guard against dark spirits, illuminating the shadows where malevolent beings might lurk. Beds were placed strategically near the hearth, so sleepers could feel its warmth and protection. Animal skins, often from wolves or bears, lined the beds, not just for comfort, but because these creatures symbolized strength and ferocity. Sleeping wrapped in their pelts was like carrying their power into the dream realm. But it wasn't just about physical protection. Rituals and charms played a vital role. Before bed, a Viking might draw runes, symbols imbued with magical power, near doorways or on their bedposts. These runes weren't just pretty carvings, they were powerful wards meant to confuse, repel or trap evil spirits. The Alge's rune, resembling a protective elk's antlers, was a favourite for warding off danger. Some Vikings placed iron weapons near their beds, not only for defence but because iron was believed to disrupt and repel supernatural beings. This might sound extreme, but when you consider the very real threat of night raids and the unseen terrors of the dark, it made perfect sense. Sleep wasn't approached casually. There were nightly prayers whispered to gods like Frigg, the goddess of dreams and motherhood, who was thought to watch over sleepers and protect them from nightmares. Odin, the All-Father, was also invoked, a god who ruled both the waking world and the realm of dreams, able to send visions or warnings to those he favoured. But even divine protection wasn't always enough. The Vikings feared the mare, a night demon that would ride on the chests of sleepers, causing suffocation and terror. This demon wasn't just a mythological scare tactic, it was a personification of sleep paralysis and night terrors. To guard against the mare, Vikings used a variety of strategies. Some hung iron or herbs like mugwort and juniper above their beds, believed to keep the demon at bay. Others recited charms or inscribed runes specifically for protection against evil spirits. The idea was simple: confuse the demon, confuse the nightmare, and reclaim peaceful rest. The line between medicine and magic was thin. Herbal remedies were part of the bedtime routine, often prescribed by wise women or healers. Valerian root, known for its calming properties, might be brewed into a tea. Mugwort, already mentioned for its protective qualities, was also thought to encourage prophetic dreams. Some Vikings believed in dream magic, deliberately seeking visions to help make decisions or foresee dangers. These rituals might involve fasting, isolation, or sleeping near a holy site. It was a risky business. Inviting the spirit world into your slumber could be enlightening, or it could mean losing yourself to madness or possession. For the lower classes, sleep rituals were simpler, but no less meaningful. Even thralls, Viking slaves, understood the importance of protecting their vulnerable night hours. They might carry small charms or sleep under animal hides, relying on the power of community and proximity to keep the darkness at bay. Communal sleeping in longhouses also offered safety in numbers. The sounds of breathing, the flickering firelight, and the warmth of bodies close together created a shield against loneliness and fear. Nighttime was also a time of storytelling and oral tradition. Elders might share tales of gods, heroes, and monsters before sleep, weaving lessons and warnings into these sagas. These stories weren't just entertainment. They reinforced cultural values, taught survival tactics, and subtly instructed listeners how to navigate the dangers of night, both real and imagined. But for all these precautions, sleep was never guaranteed to be peaceful. In the coldest months, when night stretched long and dark, Vikings faced both physical and spiritual exhaustion. The lack of sunlight could cause despair, the chill could seep into bones, and the fear of unseen threats could lead to paranoia and restlessness. Even the mightiest warriors and fiercest jarls were vulnerable once night fell. Yet sleep was also sacred, a vital cycle of death and rebirth. Closing one's eyes was a daily surrender, trusting the gods to guide your soul safely through the night and bring you back with the dawn. It was a dance with darkness, mystery and hope. As the fire burned low and the household drifted deeper into sleep, the Vikings rested, but never fully let their guard down. Because the night was long, and the unknown was always just beyond the flickering shadows. Next, we'll explore how Viking children were introduced to this mysterious world of sleep, from cradle songs to their first dreams, and how the culture of rest was passed down through generations. So close your eyes, breathe slow, and drift gently toward a Viking night, where every shadow has a story, and every dream could change a destiny. In Viking society, sleep was never just an adult affair. It was a rite of passage from the very moment a child was born. The journey into the mysterious realm of dreams and nighttime fears began early, woven tightly into the fabric of childhood. Imagine a Viking cradle nestled within the longhouse, a small wooden frame lined with furs and adorned with carvings of protective runes. It wasn't just a place for rest, it was a safeguard against the many dangers, both physical and supernatural, that threatened a newborn's fragile existence. From the earliest days, children were taught that sleep was a sacred state, one in which their souls were vulnerable to spirits, good and bad. Mothers sang lullabies not only to soothe but to ward off malevolent entities. These songs often called upon gods like Frigg or protective animal spirits, weaving magic and love into every note. But calming melodies were only one layer of the many customs surrounding Viking children's sleep. Families placed talismans near the cradle, carved wooden amulets shaped like Thor's hammer, or depictions of the protective elk rune. These symbols were believed to shield the infant from nightmares and evil eyes. The Vikings believed that certain times of night were more dangerous than others, especially the so-called witching hour, when spirits roamed freely and the veil between worlds was thinnest. During these hours, it wasn't uncommon for a parent or sibling to keep a watchful eye, whispering protective charms or stroking the child's hair gently. Stories told to children before sleep weren't just tales to pass time, they carried lessons and warnings. The sagas were full of cautionary characters, trickster spirits who might steal children who misbehaved, or fierce warriors who protected the innocent from evil forces. The balance between fear and comfort was delicate. On one hand, the night was a place of darkness and unknown horrors. On the other, it was a realm of wonder, where dreams might carry gifts or warnings. Interestingly, Viking children weren't shielded from the realities of death and hardship, as modern children often are. They learned early that life was fragile and fleeting. Many children died young, and sleep was sometimes a metaphor for death itself, a nightly rehearsal for the final journey. This understanding gave rise to rituals performed at bedtime, blending hope and sorrow. Parents would whisper prayers for protection not just through the night, but for the child's entire life. Sleep was also a communal event for children, much like adults. Siblings shared beds, and even the youngest were part of the household's nightly rhythm. The sounds of breathing, whispered stories, and the crackling fire created a shared sense of security. The longhouse itself was alive at night, filled with the soft rustling of blankets and the occasional cry or laugh. For children, sleep was the beginning of understanding their place in the wider world, both mortal and mystical. As they grew, Viking children were taught to interpret dreams and recognize signs from the gods. Dreams were a form of education, a way to connect with the ancestors and the divine. They learned that a good dream was a blessing, a nightmare, a warning. Sometimes children would even be encouraged to share their dreams with elders or shamans, who would interpret them and offer guidance. But the night wasn't always safe for Viking children. The mare, the dreaded night demon, did not discriminate. It could visit the smallest cradle or the strongest warrior. The terror of night terrors and sleep paralysis was very real, and families had their own rituals to soothe afflicted children. Iron objects were often placed near cradles, and herbs like lavender and mugwort were burned to purify the air. These practices weren't just superstition, they were early medicine, folk remedies born from generations of experience. The culture of sleep and dreams taught to Viking children was a lifelong education in respect, caution, and connection to the unseen. It was a way to prepare them for the unpredictable world beyond the longhouse walls, where battles, alliances, and fate awaited. So as you drift toward your own peaceful rest tonight, imagine the tiny Viking child curled up in a fur-lined cradle, listening to ancient lullabies and dreaming of gods, warriors, and worlds unseen. The lessons learned in those early nights would shape them into the fierce, wise Vikings of legend. For a Viking warrior, sleep was both a necessity and a gamble. The life of a fighter was brutal and unpredictable, and the night offered no promises of safety or peace. While many might imagine warriors crashing out in royal comfort after a day of raiding, the reality was far more complex and often downright dangerous. Imagine a battle-scarred Viking after a day of blood and fire. His body aches, his mind races, and all he wants is rest. But sleep for him was never a given. The dangers of the night, both natural and supernatural, lurked around every corner. Could he trust the men around him? Was the fire close enough to keep wolves at bay? Would the cold bite through his furs and steel? Viking warriors typically slept in communal halls or tents, surrounded by their comrades. Safety in numbers was crucial, but it wasn't foolproof. Feuds and rivalries simmered even among allies, and the threat of betrayal hung in the air. Trust was a luxury. One wrong move could mean a dagger in the back instead of a peaceful night's sleep. Their beds were often little more than piles of animal hides, layered thick enough to cushion their weary bodies, but still cold and hard by modern standards. The warriors didn't bother with soft mattresses or pillows. A well-worn shield sometimes doubled as a headrest. If the night was cold, and in Nordic lands it often was, they wrapped themselves in heavy pelts and cloaks, hoping to stave off the chill. Sleep wasn't just physical recovery, it was mental preparation. The Viking mind never fully switched off. A warrior needed to stay alert, ready to spring up if danger arose. This half-wakefulness was an unspoken skill, born from years of training and survival. The night brought its own kind of battles. Wolves and bears prowled close to campsites. Raiders from rival clans could strike without warning. And then there were the spirits, the restless dead, the mischievous trolls, and the malevolent wights who haunted the dark. Vikings believed these beings were especially active at night, ready to test a warrior's courage. Because of this, warriors developed their own sleep rituals. Before bed, they might sharpen their weapons, a meditative practice that calmed the mind and prepared them for tomorrow's fight. They might place their sword or axe within arm's reach, a comfort and a weapon at once. Some carried small charms or amulets, runes inscribed on wood or bone, that promised protection against evil forces and bad luck. The image of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, was a popular talisman, symbolizing strength and divine defense. Even in the throes of exhaustion, warriors paid attention to their dreams. A good dream might signal victory, a nightmare, defeat. Those dreams could be powerful motivators, or chilling warnings. Some warriors sought out seers or shamans to interpret their visions, hoping to gain an edge on the battlefield. The physical toll of the warrior's lifestyle was brutal. Wounds often went untreated or were bandaged crudely, making sleep a fitful, painful experience. The stench of sweat, blood, and unwashed bodies filled sleeping quarters, adding to the discomfort. Despite all this, warriors often envied the simple sleep of peasants and thralls. These common folk might have lacked fame or riches, but at least their nights were quieter, less fraught with political intrigue and deadly rivalry. But there was honour in hardship. To sleep lightly and wake ready to defend one's kin was part of the Viking warrior's code. It was the price of glory. And when the morning came, the warrior rose again, scarred, weary but unbroken, ready to live another day of battle, feasting and legend. While the Viking warrior's rest was restless and razor-edged with danger, the sleep of Viking women carried a different kind of weight, a complex balance of sacred duty, social expectation, and quiet resilience. In the longhouse, women were the backbone of the household. They managed the hearth, raised children, tended to wounds, and kept the clan's daily rhythms humming. Their sleep wasn't just personal downtime, it was a sacred pause between the relentless demands of their world. But don't mistake their nights for peaceful retreats. The responsibilities of a Viking woman extended into the twilight hours. Many women shared beds not only with their children, but also with animals, dogs or cats kept near for warmth and protection. These animals were more than companions, they were guardians against the restless spirits that prowled the night. Women practiced their own bedtime rituals, combining practical care with spiritual protection. Before sleep, they might lay out herbs like lavender, mugwort or valerian, not only to soothe nerves, but to keep evil spirits away. These plants were believed to have the power to bless the night and promote prophetic dreams. Sleep was a communal event for women as much as for men. Sisters, mothers and daughters often shared sleeping spaces, creating networks of warmth and comfort. This closeness was a defense against loneliness and the cold, but it also reinforced social bonds, trust, and the transmission of oral traditions. Speaking of traditions, lullabies and bedtime stories played a vital role. Women were the storytellers and keepers of ancestral wisdom. They passed down sagas and myths, often embedding lessons about honour, bravery, and the ever-present shadow of the gods. But sleep was also a time of vulnerability. Women, especially in childbirth, were exposed to immense risk. The longhouse held designated birthing spaces where mothers rested before and after delivery, guarded by midwives who combined medical knowledge with spiritual practices. Midwives were the protectors of both body and soul. They employed charms, runes, and prayers to ease pain and ward off malevolent forces. The fear of night demons like the mare was especially acute in these moments, where life and death hung in the balance. Beyond childbirth, women's sleep was entwined with the complex web of Viking social life. Marriages were often arranged, and the bedchamber could be a political arena. Husbands and wives negotiated power, loyalty, and alliances even as they shared their pillows. Infidelity, jealousy, and intrigue weren't strangers to the longhouse. The mistress of the household needed to maintain authority not just during the day, but also in the intimate sphere of the night. A whisper, a glance, or a secret meeting under moonlight could alter the fate of families and clans. Women also engaged in their own forms of dream magic. Some sought visions to guide decisions or communicate with deceased relatives. Sleep was a bridge to the divine, and women, often seen as closer to the spiritual realm, were revered for their ability to navigate it. Of course, not all women shared the same experience. Slave women, thralls, had fewer comforts and little protection. Their sleep was often fitful and short, taken in the corners of the longhouse or near the fire, always under watchful eyes. Yet even in hardship, sleep for Viking women was a moment of quiet power. It was where strength was renewed, where the stories of their people lived on, and where dreams kept the flames of hope burning through the darkest nights. So as the night deepens, imagine the Viking woman settling down after a long day, her mind filled with duty, her heart guarded by ancient prayers, and find a calm in the rhythms of her sleep. Sleep for the Vikings wasn't just about rest. It was deeply tied to place, space, and social order. The very environment where one slept carried meaning, status, and belief. To truly understand Viking sleep culture, you have to look at the spaces themselves. The longhouse, the ship, the burial mound, and even the outdoor wilderness. Most Viking sleep happened within the longhouse, the great communal hall that was the heart of daily life. This wasn't just a roof over heads. It was a microcosm of Viking society, layered with hierarchy, ritual, and familial bonds. Inside the longhouse, the sleeping arrangements reflected social status. The chieftain or head of the household and his family occupied the prime spots, raised platforms near the hearth, or in separated alcoves draped with animal pelts. Their beds were fashioned from wood, lined with soft furs and stuffed with straw, designed for comfort but also to showcase wealth. The rest of the household, thralls, servants, younger family members, slept in communal areas, often on shared benches or the floor covered with rushes and blankets. Privacy was scarce, walls were thin, and bodies close. This closeness reinforced social bonds but also ensured that everyone was accountable to the group. The hearth was the soul of the longhouse, and its warmth reached every sleeping corner. But it was also a spiritual anchor. Fire was sacred to the Vikings, associated with the god Loki and the life-giving power of the sun. To sleep near the hearth was to be wrapped in protection and divine favour. The longhouse was also a stage for rituals surrounding sleep. Before night fell, families might gather to recite prayers or sing songs to honour the gods and ancestors, asking for safe passage through the dark hours. The echo of voices mingling with a crackling fire created an atmosphere both comforting and sacred. But sleep wasn't confined to the longhouse. The Vikings were sailors and explorers, and their sleep on ships was a whole different experience, one shaped by the unforgiving sea and the demands of travel. Aboard a Viking longship, space was limited and exposed. Warriors and crew often slept in shifts, wrapped in heavy cloaks or furs, bracing against the cold spray of the sea and the chill of the night air. There were no beds, only wooden benches or the ship's floor. Sleeping on a ship carried its own risks. Storms could come without warning, tossing the vessel and threatening to pitch sleepers into the freezing waters below. The constant motion made restful sleep elusive, but it also trained the Viking body to endure hardship and remain alert. Interestingly, the ship was also a spiritual space. It was a symbol of journey, both in life and death. Viking burial ships, for example, reflected this connection, serving as floating tombs to guide the dead to the afterlife. The boundary between the living and the dead was thin in Viking thought, and this bled into their understanding of sleep. Just as a ship carried its crew across the seas, sleep was seen as a journey for the soul, a nightly passage through realms unknown. The Vikings also slept outdoors, whether in temporary camps during raids or in the wild landscapes they called home. Sleeping beneath the stars, wrapped in pelts and leaning against rocks or trees, was a practice steeped in respect for nature's power. Nature itself was both protector and threat. The aurora borealis, for example, was believed to be the glow of the Valkyries' armour as they swept across the sky collecting fallen warriors. Such sights could inspire awe and fear, influencing how Vikings perceived the night in their dreams. Outdoor sleep rituals often involve leaving offerings or marking the sleeping spot with runes to ensure safety. These practices reveal the Vikings' deep connection to the land, the spirits dwelling within it, and the ever-present dance between life and death. All these sleeping spaces, the longhouse, ship, and wilderness, tell a story about Viking values, community, resilience, spirituality, and respect for the unknown. As you let these images settle, prepare to journey next into the fascinating topic of Viking dreams, their meanings, interpretations, and how they shape decisions both grand and small. Dreams in Viking culture were much more than fleeting images behind closed eyelids. They were portals to other worlds, messages from the gods, and sometimes even glimpses of the future. For Vikings, the night's visions carried weight far beyond the personal. They could dictate battle strategies, political moves, and even matters of the heart. Unlike the modern mind that often dismisses dreams as nonsense or random brain noise, the Vikings saw dreams as deeply significant, tied to their spirituality in daily lives. The Old Norse word for dream, drauma, wasn't just about sleep. It was a sacred experience, a moment when the veil between the mortal world and the divine thinned to a mere whisper. Imagine a Viking chieftain reclining by the hearth after a long day, his mind heavy with the burdens of leadership. As sleep claims him, he is transported into a realm where gods speak in symbols, ancestors offer warnings, and the future flickers like the flame of a candle. But the nature of these dreams could vary dramatically. A good dream might show victorious battles, bountiful harvests, or the protection of a beloved god like Odin or Freya. These were signs of favour, fueling courage and confidence. On the flip side, bad dreams or nightmares were often seen as warnings, omens of betrayal, death, or disaster. The Vikings believed that such dreams could be influenced by external forces, malevolent spirits called Draugr or Mara, that haunted sleepers, bringing terror and paralysis. To protect themselves, Vikings used an array of rituals. Some would wear amulets or carry runic talismans that warded off bad dreams. Others recited prayers or chanted protective verses before bed. Some even slept with iron objects nearby, as iron was thought to repel evil. Interpretation was key. Dreams weren't simply passively received. They were actively decoded by dream experts, shamans, or wise women. These interpreters would analyse symbols, a raven, a serpent, the turning of a wheel, and advise how to respond in waking life. A famous example involves the legendary Viking hero, Sigurd the Dragon Slayer. Before a pivotal battle, Sigurd reportedly had a prophetic dream featuring a dragon wrapped around a tree. An image later echoed in his waking quest and eventual triumph. But dreams could be more than messages. They could be inspirations. Poets and skalds sometimes claimed their verses were gifts from the dream world, channeling the gods' wisdom through nighttime visions. Thus, sleep was a creative wellspring as vital to Viking culture as sword or shield. The social dimension of dreams was also fascinating. Elders and leaders might hold dream councils, where important community decisions were influenced by collective dream interpretation. These gatherings blurred the line between spirituality and politics, reinforcing the sacred nature of leadership. Children, too, were taught the importance of dreams from a young age. Parents would encourage sharing and discussing dreams, believing it helped connect the family to the ancestors and the wider cosmos. Interestingly, the Vikings also believed in shared dreams, experiences where multiple people dreamed the same vision, often seen as a powerful sign or a call to action. Of course, not all dreams were grand or noble. Night terrors and sleep paralysis were common afflictions, often blamed on the Mara, the nightmare demon who sat on the sleeper's chest, causing suffocation and fear. The Vikings had names, remedies and rituals to combat these attacks, blending medicine and magic. Sometimes dream guides or spirit helpers were called upon, figures like the Valkyries, who not only selected the slain in battle, but also visited the sleeping to offer guidance and protection. For the Vikings, dreams were a living, breathing part of reality, a space where myth, history and daily life intertwined. They shaped the course of wars, marriages, and even exploration. So as you lie down tonight, imagine the ancient Vikings, eyes closed, mind open, navigating the shadowy currents of the dream world. Remember, what you see in sleep might just be the whisper of a god, or the echo of your own soul. For Vikings, the journey into sleep was never a casual affair. It was a deliberate crossing from the waking world into the mysterious realm of dreams and rest. And like every journey, it demanded preparation, ritual, and respect. As the day faded and twilight settled over the fjords and forests, Vikings began their nightly routines with care, weaving together practical needs, spiritual practices, and communal habits. This was not only to ensure physical comfort, but to secure protection from the unseen dangers lurking in the dark. First, there was the matter of hygiene, which, contrary to the popular Vikings smelled terrible myth, was actually quite well maintained for the time. Vikings bathed frequently, often weekly, and used natural soaps made from animal fats and wood ash. Before bed, many would wash their hands and faces, symbolically cleansing themselves of the day's impurities and preparing to enter the sacred realm of sleep. Clothing was another important element. Vikings typically slept in their undergarments or light tunics made of wool or linen. Layering was key, especially in the cold Nordic climate. They wrapped themselves in thick animal pelts, bear, wolf or reindeer, that provided insulation and a feeling of security, much like a warm protective shell. But comfort was only half the story. The Vikings were deeply superstitious, and the night was a time when the veil between the living and spirit worlds thinned dangerously. To guard against misfortune, they employed a variety of charms, rituals, and talismans. Runes, those mysterious symbols etched into stone, wood, and bone, played a starring role. Before sleep, a Viking might carve protective runes onto their doorframes, bedposts, or even the inside of their cloak. These runes were believed to shield the sleeper from evil spirits and bad dreams. Amulets were equally important. The hammer of Thor, Mjolnir, was worn as a pendant or placed near the bed, symbolizing divine protection and strength. Some Vikings kept small figures or carvings representing protective deities or animals close by, drawing on their power to guard through the night. Another common practice was the lighting of candles or oil lamps, but fire was never left unattended. Flames represented both life and destruction, an unpredictable force that needed respect. The flickering light was said to confuse malevolent spirits, preventing them from entering the home. Before lying down, families might gather for a short prayer or chant, calling on gods like Odin, Freya, or Frigg to watch over them. These moments of collective focus brought a sense of peace and reinforced community bonds, especially important in the close quarters of Viking life. Medicinal herbs were also a part of the bedtime ritual. Plants like valerian, chamomile, and mugwort were brewed into teas or placed beneath pillows. These natural remedies soothed the mind and body, easing the transition to restful sleep. In some households, the role of the Seidkona, a woman skilled in magic and prophecy, was crucial. She would perform rituals to bless the night and protect the family from nightmares or spiritual attack. The Seidkona's knowledge blended the practical and mystical, a testament to the Vikings' intricate relationship with the unseen. For travellers, such as warriors on campaign or traders at sea, sleep preparations were adapted to the environment but no less serious. Tents and ships were carefully secured, talismans hung in visible places, and watches were set to guard against surprise attacks or natural dangers. Despite all precautions, sleep could still be elusive. The harsh realities of Viking life, pain from wounds, anxiety over looming battles, and the constant threat of enemies, often turned night into a restless vigil. Yet, it was precisely because of these dangers that sleep became sacred. It was a daily victory, a moment of surrender to the rhythms of the body and the will of the gods. Each dawn was a testament to survival, resilience, and the unyielding Viking spirit. So as you prepare to drift off tonight, imagine the ancient Norse weaving their protective runes, wrapping themselves in pelts, and whispering prayers to the gods. Know that you share in a timeless human ritual, the quiet surrender to sleep, that great equalizer. If you stayed awake this long, you deserve a Viking victory, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe and let me know in the comments which video you want next. Now relax, take some deep breaths, and enjoy the relaxing sounds that Vikings listened to when slept so long ago.